Welcome and bienvenue. Welcome once again to another Cladding Matters. We are missing one person who's had an issue with his connection, but we're very glad that we're connected to Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club, of course, Steve Day of Building Safety Scheme, and of course, Zahrah Aullybocus of Nexa Law. Hopefully, we'll be joined very soon by Silas, another sage gentleman of WiggyWam. But first of all, let's get us underway. Now, today's proposition is the following. A fire risk and safety in a can being kicked down the road. And of course, I'm going to pass this straight over while Zahrah seems to have problems with her camera. Oh, there she is. Wonderful. To Hamish. Hamish, would you get us underway?
Well, I do have an element of concern. We've had lots of noises, and we had a powerful speech from a number of folk after the last sort of election, sort of saying all these mammoth things that were going to be done relative to, particularly to do with housing, which is, but we don't need to mention anything else. Housing in its own is sort of bad enough. Of all these things that were going to be happening during this term of Parliament. And so what we do, I mean, 2024 is about gone now. In reality, other than imposing quite significant burden on the vast number of the population, and there's even worse to come early parts of next year, there's nothing genuinely happened that is going to make it possible to get our wondrous new sort of build program sort of up and running. And I think, to put it worse still, we know there are certain things that have to happen to enable that. But there's all this talk. And what we do here, and is unfortunately, there is, and I remember Silas, and hopefully Silas will be able to sort of join us. Silas particularly has mentioned in the past, the last thing we really want is government intervention. It is far better if we can resolve issue ourselves. And unfortunately, we've just had intervention after intervention after intervention in many aspects. But what they're trying to do, in a way, by putting too much in there, is making it so hard for people to make appropriate and the right sort of decisions to take them forward. So we have a situation now, we'll speak about it a little bit further, that we've got all of these people, particularly in the high density population areas, relying so much on flats. We do need to get the fire safety regulations sorted out. We do need to make sure that the quality of build is correct, but nothing has happened to help any of this along yet.
Steve, can I come to you? I was under the impression that even though we have some fire safety regulations, that perhaps fire chiefs weren't that keen to hold people's feet to the fire. No pun intended.
Exactly. And maybe they should think about people with their feet by the fire when they make their determinations. But yeah, so just for your listeners, so there's two pieces of legislation that are important with building safety. So there's the building safety regulations, and they're for specific dates. They improve or they get watered down as you look at them. And they change different periods of time. So they often every other year or every 5 years or so on. It just depends when they want to improve the regulations. So that should be how buildings are declared lawfully built or not. But then there's another piece of legislation called the Fire Safety Order, which takes a risk-based approach. And this basically has the danger of undermining the regulations that basically are the most strict of the two pieces of legislation. Now, we've seen this firsthand at Royal Artillery Quays play out. So we've got some fire stairs going up 16 stories in a glass fire shaft. And the building regulations state that the stairs should be the right width, 110 centimeters, but not, but the fire safety order doesn't really mandate that because of the risk-based approach. And we were having discussions with the fire brigade who enforce the lesser of those two pieces of legislation, the fire safety order, and saying, well, shouldn't you be looking at the regulations as well? And this is an ongoing battle at Royal Artillery Quays, where we're trying to push the fire brigade to say, well, you need to look at both the fire safety order, which you're doing, but also the stricter building regulations. And unless that's done, we really, as the title of this podcast says, we really are just kicking problems down the road and dealing with them when we have another Grenfell. And that's a shock. And you would have thought that the enforcement authority should be enforcing the law at the time of construction. Well, there's a grey area, and there's the same grey area exists on new buildings that exists for the post-Grenfell remediations with the watered down PAS 9980 standard, which is yet again another risk-based approach. So we're in danger of just saying, well, the building regulations, if no one enforces them, then, you know, unless you take them to court over it, and very few people have the resources to do it, you really have kicked this safety issue down the road until the next fire. And that's what's very, very sad, shocking, and surprising post-Grenfell.
Zahrah, welcome. Do you think fire safety is being kicked down the road? Oh dear. Literally, as we went, let's go to Wendy first. Wendy, would do. Okay, let me do this. Right.
Technical gremlins.
Well, yes, it is a little bit technical gremlins. Good Lord. Look at this. All right, finally, Wendy, do you think that fire safety is being kicked down the road in the same way as Steve has just been pointing out?
Sadly, yes, I do. And part of the reason being is because it's certainly the impression that I get here in the UK is that we love to tie ourselves up in paperwork. We love to tie ourselves up in process and red tape. But action seems to be so far removed from what happens in reality. And it's so sad because it really feels like the lives that were lost at Grenfell then become diluted in the action that's taken because so little is done. So it does feel that the longer time goes on, the less likely we are to learn the lessons from Grenfell. And we really need to stop navel gazing and actually start taking action.
All right. Zahrah, now I've got you back. Perfect. What's your comment on this?
It's definitely being kicked down the road because you've got conveyancers that are clueless. They don't know what to be telling, you know, Joe Blogs off the street that's buying. And, you know, you've basically got people that are desperate for a roof overhead. So they'll say yes to anything. And, you know, they will continue to get away with it because people will still keep buying.
Weren't you telling me the other day that even when you point out the blinding obvious, they should take two steps back and view this in the round? They still want to pile ahead.
Yes.
It's crazy. I mean, surely common sense will eventually prevail in this.
I think common sense only prevails once people have been bitten, and then you'll see the people that are shouting the loudest are the ones who have been hurt, whereas those who are not yet in the game think, oh, how bad could it be? Can't be that bad, can it really?
Right.
And so they'll carry on. So, you know, they're not allowed to charge ground rent anymore in these new flats, but they're finding other ways to make money. The most recent one I saw was a comfort cooling charge on a high-rise building, and I was sitting there going, what the heck is that? And so they're making money off air conditioning.
Oh, comfort cooling.
Yes. Yes, and there's 4 different types of service charges in this lease and a communal heating system. And, you know, those kind of things cause problems on top of cladding. But even with these new, you know, I have buyers sending me pretty pictures, and I go to them, ask the seller or ask the new build site what that pretty looking piece of wood is made out of. you know, whether it's cladding, plastic or whatever, they just, and then the site office just basically talk them into using their recommended solicitors, because as conveyancers, you know, construction materials are out of our remit. You need to talk to a surveyor.
Wow. Silas, it seems to me that not everybody is on the same side.
Well, that's an interesting observation, Gareth. I mean, I'm deeply saddened that we have seemingly a society where mistakes are made, are understandable in one respect, and that yet those mistakes are not learned from. And as Wendy so eloquently put it earlier on, there seems to be a lot of navel gazing and not actually a lot of action. And what seems to happen with many of these scandals that I've noticed over time is that the actual result of an inquiry might come 20, 30, 40 years later, and at which time there would be then a suggestion, well, wrong was done, but then nobody can be held to account. And this is what I see time and time again. We have changes of government, we have changes of housing ministers, we have changes of people in a position of power, shall we say, who are able to do something or able to enforce something, but choose not to. And that is a tragic state of affairs, and I think shows a massive lack of integrity in the people that are being charged with policing the rules and regulations.
Hamish, it seems to me that although we shouldn't be kicking the can down the road, people certainly are.
Well, I think we have a twofold sort of aspect here, and I think as mentioned earlier, and it's a comment that Silas brought up several sort of times here relative to that government intervention. We have a situation where we've got a government that's so concerned about housing. That was one of the major items that was sort of spoken about relative to their sort of getting into, and the important aspects. We're going to. I think we were speaking last week about a scenario where the government were going to get involved and do all sorts of things by 2029, where in actual fact there's no way that anything could be possibly resolved by them, because the best shout before then had been 2035, and some suggestion that 2050 would be a time when the cladding issue. You think about this. I mean, Steve's lived in that flat. He's a newcomer. He's only lived there 10 years.
It's only been there 10 years. God.
There's some people have been living there since 2002 when we first built, and we're going to take up till that period of time when even if you look up to sort of 20, we're speaking about the best part of 30 years. To who the heck's responsible for all of this? And again, it's one of those things that there's nobody being held responsible for the damage that's been caused, the lives that have been lost, the value of properties that sort of gone downhill. And along comes an election like it did, and I think it's worth mentioning this briefly, because it seems to be right, the politicians are going to be actually meant to be saying they're going to be doing something, yet the general public couldn't really give a monkeys about the whole thing.
Wow.
Less than 20%, 15% turnout in an area that's full of high-rise flats, to actually speak about a situation where somebody could go in there and start looking at, can we regulate what's going on here? So there's nothing happening to stop this from going on, which is, as I said, we've got a twofold thing now. Even the politicians that said they were going to do something aren't doing anything, and the public aren't interested in the public. What the heck can we do about the whole thing?
Oh, Steve, in the light of your recent efforts at the council, which I commend you for, the massive swing in your favour was down to you championing building safety, was it not? So there's obviously interest, and given the ridiculously low turnout for those elections, by logical extrapolation, there's probably a whole bunch more people who would be interested in building safety, just to make their feelings felt.
Yes, I mean, so the election is a West Thamesmead by-election held yesterday, which I was a candidate.
Right.
I came second. I managed to get a swing from Labour because it's a safe Labour seat historically at 20%. So it's a big sort of take for the Lib Dems, even though we didn't win. And yeah, one of the reasons
you had a good 30% odd of the vote, didn't you?
Yeah.
Which against a safe seat, that's pretty good going.
Yeah, I know. We're very happy with it, and we will build on it. And but the reason I got that swing is building safety. So we've got 1,000 people in Royal Artillery Quays. That's where I live. And then just down the river, we've got another big crescent building full of cladded flats. One of them's called Strand House. It's another about 700 people are affected. So, there's a lot of people that have got these watered down remediation standards that condemn you to permanently high insurance to worry about. And that's because the builders had convinced the government to water down what they had to do to remediate. But the problem is insurers who are holding the risk don't really want to. So where's the risk going? From the builder to the insurer, and from the insurer to the lucky person that owns the flat. And you're seeing a transfer of risk. That's how I now describe the building safety crisis. There's a risk due to wrongdoing. Could be the developers, could be the regulations, right? What do? They work out what's the minimum they can get away with politically. That gives you a nice amount of risk left. And then they have a very clever way of apportioning that risk through the system so it ultimately ends back at the consumer. And yet the majority of the country, if they care at all, and that's a big if, most people don't care, but for the ones that do, is manage the damage. And that's our politics. It's managing problems. It's managing public outcries of wrongdoing. It's managing instead of dealing with the root causes permanently. And until that politics change, people will ultimately reject it. And then we're going to get a rise of parties we might not want. And I want to, as a Liberal Democrat, I want to challenge that. And I will be standing if they'll have me in a year and a half's time. And I'm going to go around every house in West Thamesmead and listen to people. Not say much, listen and get to know them. And then I'll come back and I'll win it.
That's it. I love a bit of fighting talk. Hamish, would you care to take us home, please, sir?
Well, it's hard to actually sort of lead on from that. I think that the fighting spirit of Steve actually really sort of carries the day there. And I think it matters so much that we have people like Zahrah who's looking from a legal perspective. But unfortunately, people aren't taking notice even of the legal perspective of the whole thing. It's almost as though everybody's going blind to the serious issues that sort of exist here.
Right.
And just sort of add sort of something in that I have mobility issues myself, not as bad as many, I have to admit. But when you look at the high proportion of people who lost their lives in Grenfell because of their lack of mobility, they had to stay somewhere. And of course, they weren't protected from the fire because of the inferior quality of the product that was actually sort of being used. So it's a big concern. So, I mean, we all need to stay warm and sort of all, but however, I do see it as it's a sad thing. 2024 we should have been going out with a great blast with this tremendous interest that we had in what was going to be happening with all of our housing. And it's like an absolute damn squid. Away they've all gone. None of the politicians, particularly the way that they enjoy their lives with and the properties that they sort of seem to have and maintained at our expense in many instances, because they've all got their two properties and we're paying for the heating and their safety and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, in the meantime, those that don't have somewhere safe to live, those that don't have anywhere at all, they're missing out. And
yeah, but on the one hand, you've got poor people who are just on the beginning of the ladder being presented with either crap or crap. On the other hand, you've got people coming to poor Zahrah saying, I'm going to ignore all these problems, just plow ahead. It's crazy.
It's selective hearing, Gareth.
Oh dear, selective hearing. Well, and my wife accuses me of that on a daily basis. All right, well, let me thank all of you for taking time to be with us today on Cladding Matters. May I also announce that in 2025, the return of Property Matters, more general purpose talking about all aspects of property. Again, Hamish will be helping me run that, and I look forward to welcoming possibly somebody there. But until next time, as per usual, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please, please, as it come up to Christmas, I beg of you, look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll punch through the moon, but their word always fails.